Let's get going here.
Okay.
So, all right. So, you guys, this is Sal. He is really a friend of mine. I met Sal by doing his podcast, Mind Pump, which is the #1 fitness podcast. It's amazing. He and his co-hosts are so fun, and they're just their podcast and is not only awesome, but they have an amazing following. Like their following is hilarious. Like you guys have the best fans ever. I literally crack up. If I'm bored, I go on your Instagram and I read your comments, and I'm suddenly in a good mood. So, and I have my Mind Pump Media shirt on, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome.
Look at that. She makes it look good too. That's great.
Right. I actually really wear it. I wear it all the time. So thanks for
Walking
that.
billboard. I appreciate that. Thank you.
But really, what we really wanted to talk to Sal about is his new book, because we read his new book and we loved it. It's called The Resistance Training Revolution, and it's awesome. So that's what we're going to focus on mainly today. And so let's get going. So #1, we know we were just talking to Sal about having a new baby and how that's going, and they're a little bit sleep deprived, but otherwise that's going well.
Yeah. You know, I a little bit for me in comparison to my poor wife. She's really bearing the brunt of that, that challenge. It's really, really difficult, but I think part of what makes it so hard is you just care so much,
Oh,
you
yeah.
care so much about your kid. But I mean, it's also amazing. It's the most meaningful thing I think I've ever experienced in my life. And now
The love you feel for that little human is, you just can't even describe it.
No, I remember when so I have 2 older kids. I have my son is 15 and my daughter's 11, and then we have our 7-month-old. And I remember it hit me with my first son, because you just don't have any idea. There's no concept of what that's like. And I remember when he was born, and then the feelings I started to develop very quickly. And I remember thinking, oh, this is what people talk about.
Yeah.
It was so overwhelming, and so no words could describe just the feeling. I mean, I love my parents. I love, my family and my siblings, but there's no comparison. And that's what makes it hard. It says you care so much.
Oh,
Because if you didn't care that much, I don't think it would be nearly as difficult, but it's just,
no.
it's incredible. So
They rip your little heart out.
yes.
Sal really loves his wife too. And I can tell you
love
from
that.
personal experience, because I've talked to Jess and Sal many times through text during Jess's pregnancy, and Sal was so involved.
I
like
love
wanting
that.
to know everything that's going on, and is this normal? Is this okay? Like, you're just so great. You're just a great husband, and I love her. She's amazing. So we're just so happy to have you on.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, let's dive in. So the biggest thing right now that I wanted to talk to you about was the cardio craze, right? Get into that a little bit about the negative impacts that it has on weight loss, and then the different types of cardio and what we should be focusing on if we do that.
Yeah, no. And I want to be very clear. There's value to pretty much any form of activity, so long as it's applied appropriately. I want to make sure I explain that, because any form of activity can be applied inappropriately to the individual and can cause problems. All forms of exercise can be that way. But if done properly and appropriately for the individual, there's always value. That includes cardio, that includes Pilates, yoga, of course, strength training or resistance training. So I want to start with that. Now, the cardio craze, let's dive into that a little bit. So I have to paint the context, I think, to kind of explain or break that down. So we've been in the middle of kind of this chronic health epidemic in modern societies that I would say we started to become aware of probably sometime in the 60s, definitely in the 70s, and then really the awareness started to grow after that. And the big umbrella chronic health issue that's been at the forefront of that is obesity, right? So we call it the obesity epidemic. And obesity by itself definitely causes lots of issues. It's an umbrella health problem that contributes to so many other issues. It can increase your risk of cancer, of course, heart disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's, dementia, pretty much any chronic health issue. Obesity kind of contributes to that, but you don't necessarily have to be obese to suffer from those things. So there's this category of chronic health issues that are relatively unique to modern societies. To give you an example, I'm old enough to remember, when I got my first personal training certification, we learned very briefly about diabetes. And there were 2 types of diabetes that they taught us about. There was type 1 diabetes, which means you don't produce enough insulin. It's kind of autoimmune, based. Or then there was another type of diabetes that they used to call adult onset diabetes. That was actually the name of it. Now they changed the name to type 2 diabetes because children started to get adult onset. And they said, okay, we need to change the name because it's no longer just for adults. So this just kind of paint the context of the stuff that we're dealing with in modern societies. Now, what's causing this in modern societies? There's a few different things. One is we've done a really, really good job of creating lives for ourselves through innovation, through productivity that really take out the physical activity and physical challenges of life that we used to have, right? If you look at the way humans have lived for most of human history, the vast majority of human history, it was a very, very active life by necessity. To find food, you had to be very active to do so. It was a lot of work to produce very little amounts of calories. So that's just the way we lived, but we did a good job of producing lives that just were very inactive. So that's one piece of the puzzle. The other piece of the puzzle is we also did a very, very good job of making calories easily accessible. So they were no longer hard to come by. In fact, they got so easy to come by that we started to suffer from the other end of the spectrum, like obesity, from it. And through that process have made food hyper palatable and extremely convenient. Okay. So that's the context that we're kind of looking at. And that's generally speaking, and there's more to that. Okay. Of course we can add in chemicals, estrogen, stress and all that stuff, but those are the big, I would say, big rocks that have kind of caused this problem. And then you see in societies as they modernize that we start to develop. So in looking at that context, we have to examine what's the solution for that, because it's real important that you understand that context before you look at the solution. Now, the problem has been, and by the way, the answers to our chronic health issues in modern societies really, to date, come from the health, fitness, and wellness industry. The Western medicine market or industry really doesn't have any solutions for this. Nobody has solutions but the wellness, health, and fitness industry. Now, this doesn't mean that they've done a good job. But the solutions are found within that. Now, here's the problem. The problem is we've looked at that issue. We've identified we eat too much. We're not active. And then we've said, okay, the way to solve this problem is to create an energy imbalance. In other words, in order to lose weight, and this is a fact, it's much more complex than this, but generally speaking, you have to take in less calories than you burn, or to put it differently, you have to burn more calories than you take in. When you do that, you lose weight. As you lose weight, lots of these issues start to get solved. In fact, in a calorie deficit, your sugar intake and saturated fat intake and other types of things, they don't make as big of a difference. They still make a difference, but when you look at someone in a calorie deficit, if they eat a lot of sugar, it doesn't make as big of a difference as if they're eating more calories than they burn. So they know this and they say, okay, this is how we'll solve this issue, although it's more complex than that. Now, the problem with that is that when they look at the equation of taking in less calories, burning more calories, then they say, okay, let's look at exercise as a way to burn more calories. And they've placed all the value on exercise on how many calories you burn while you do it. So they look at all forms of exercise and they say, okay, here's most of its value. How many calories are you burning when you're doing 30 minutes of this activity versus other types of activities? Now, the problem with this is that we're ignoring the real value of exercise, the biggest value of exercise, probably 95% of the value of exercise, which is how does this form of exercise get my body to adapt? And then what do those adaptations mean? So we've ignored that. We've just looked at calories burned. And when you look at calories burned, if that's all we're valuing, well, yeah, then it becomes very clear that cardio is the most valuable form of exercise, because 1 hour of running will burn more calories than 1 hour of any other form of exercise, more than 1 hour of yoga, more than 1 hour of strength training, or any other form of exercise. Again, the problem is nobody's looking at what that exercise is producing in the body in terms of adaptations. And then, of course, nobody's looking further and saying, well, what does that mean? So let's dive into that a little bit so that we can kind of understand why cardio is one of the worst exercise solutions for the modern health issue, context that I painted earlier. When you do lots of any form of exercise, the reason why exercise gets your body to change at all is because it's a stress on the body. So if I go run, and let's say I don't normally run, and I say, okay, I want to lose weight. Let me go outside. Let me lace up my shoes and let me go try to run. The first time I do it, I might make it around the block. Lungs are burning. I'm really tired. I need to stop. So my body senses that as a stress. And then my body says, okay, we need to get better at this activity so that next time the same insult doesn't produce the same kind of stress. So my body gets better at cardio. This is not, this isn't something that's controversial. It's obvious. Whatever you do, you get better at. So what's happening when my body's getting better at cardio? Well, a few things. Number one, it needs improved endurance. It doesn't need much strength. In fact, it needs very little strength. Your evidence is in long distance runners. You look at the best long distance runners in the world, and they have very, very little strength. They have little muscle, oftentimes little fat, but also little muscle, and they're small. They're just not very strong. The body doesn't need strength to do that. It needs to have lots of endurance, and it also tries to become more efficient at that activity. So imagine if you had a vehicle that was, artificially intelligent, and that vehicle modeled itself to become better at your driving habits. So if you get in this car and you drive long distances at 30 miles an hour, this car would understandably turn itself into a one-cylinder engine or a hybrid engine with very little power or speed. So it just becomes very efficient, and it burns far less gasoline because it wants to get better at what your driving habits are showing. This is what your body does. So because I'm burning a lot of calories while I'm doing it, because I need very, very little strength, my body actually pares down muscle to make itself more efficient at cardio. Now, why does it pare down muscle? Well, it doesn't need the strength, and muscle is expensive. It burns a lot of calories. So it's like, okay, let's get rid of this, just like the car made the engine smaller. Let's get rid of this muscle and become more efficient. By the way, when I say more efficient, I'm literally saying your metabolism slows down. Your body learns to burn less calories. Now, this isn't just my experience. And of course, my experience I've seen this happen.
Right.
I don't know, countless times in my 20 plus years of training clients and managing gyms and whatnot. So I've seen this, but the studies actually support this. People who do in studies cardio plus diet, what we find is weight loss, but roughly half of the weight tends to be muscle. So a significant amount of the weight that's being lost is coming from muscle. By the way, little side note, if you lose 10 pounds on the scale, but 5 pounds of that is muscle, your body fat percentage has basically stayed the same.
Right.
You've actually made yourself a smaller, slower metabolism, same flabbiness version of yourself.
Yeah.
And so, also giving yourself some pretty severe adrenal issues at times,
Yes. And we'll get into that. I want to get into the hormone stuff. That's very, very important.
Yeah. Awesome.
We'll get into that. So doing all this cardio plus diet, what ends up happening is people initially will lose weight. Muscle is part of it, a big chunk of it, but they'll lose weight. Then the metabolism adapts, slows down. Now they're at this position, which happens very quickly. It's within the first 2 months. And anybody who's ever done this knows what I'm talking about. It's like I lose weight in 2 months, 10 pounds, and then boom, nothing else is happening. Now I have to eat less or run more to get any more weight loss. And it's not hard to see how unsustainable this is. This is part of the reason why the fail rate, it's a big part of the reason why the fail rate with exercise and diet to solve obesity is something along the lines of 85%. I would argue it's probably more, like 90%. Every single year, millions of Americans lose weight. And every single year, the vast majority of them gain the weight back. And also, another side note, because they lost muscle doing that, they gain the weight back, but they don't gain the muscle back. They're actually in a worse position
Yes.
than where they were before. And I would see this all the time. I would see this with clients who had to lose 30 pounds, but because they lost it and gained it so many times through this process that I'm talking about, now I have this woman, she's 40 something years old, 30 pounds overweight. I'm having her track her calories just to see where her metabolism's at.
Yeah.
And this poor woman is eating 1,500 calories a day and she wants to lose weight. And what am I going to do? Put her on 1,000 calories a day?
Right.
Right. It's not sustainable.
It's absolutely not sustainable. And this has been the paradigm that we've been sold over and over again by the fitness industry and supported by the medical community. Now, part of the reason I want to say why the medical community has supported this is because they have a very, very poor understanding of sustainable weight loss. Even today, they have a terrible understanding of this. I mean, doctors still will put people on shakes and have them stop eating food. And often doctors will recommend people do tons and tons of cardio to lose weight. So they still have a poor understanding. But a big reason for this is there were very little studies done on other forms of exercise. In fact, you just go back 15 years or 20 years, every single study done on exercise and health was done with cardio. There were no studies done on resistance training or strength training at all. Part of that is because animal studies are hard to do with resistance training. It's hard to get a mouse to lift weights. But the other part is strength training. The studies on it were relegated to sports. There was nobody thought to themselves, let's see how this affects health. Now, we do have lots of studies now, and you see the medical community now start to shift a little bit. In fact, I had a cardiologist on the podcast recently, and the reason why I have him on is because he's doing all these talks to other cardiologists and saying, hey, the form of exercise we need to be recommending is strength training, which
Awesome. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about strength training for a second, or resistance training, and why that's why I wrote a book about that.
Mm-hmm.
If we go back to that paradigm of, got to take in less calories than you burn, and then we look at the exercise portion of that formula, let's ignore the amount of calories that you burn while you do that exercise. That's not important. Let's look at the adaptations. When you do strength training or resistance training, what you're telling your body to do is to get strong. That's the main adaptation. So when I go and I lift weights, or I do body weight resistance training, or I use bands. By the way, resistance training is any form of exercise specifically programmed and designed to build strength. So you can use any form of resistance. I could use my body weight, bands, free weights, which is obvious, machines. Any of those will work, right? If you do them right. So when I'm doing that in that way, I'm telling my body, we need strength. We need some strength. And what follows along with that is muscle. What happens as a side effect of that is I speed up my metabolism. Muscle is a very metabolically active tissue. It requires more calories to maintain. Not only that, but if I combine with that a diet that is supportive of me building muscle, so I'm not cutting my calories drastically, but rather trying to feed this muscle building process, there's also this range of efficiency that my metabolism has within the context of my lean body mass, meaning I may only gain 3 pounds of muscle on the scale, which will only, by the way, if I could snap my finger and put 7 pounds of muscle on everybody watching this right now, everybody would just feel tighter. Nobody would feel bigger. Muscle is very dense, right? So just so people don't freak out over the scale, they would just feel tight, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you gain 3 pounds of muscle and you're feeding that muscle, you actually burn more calories than the formulas will show you that muscle burns per pound, because you're also telling your body, we don't need to be so efficient with calories. It's okay. You can burn these. You can burn them in the form of heat or energy, like go for it. And so what does the weight loss look like when you put resistance training in the formula, or strength training instead of cardio? Well, what happens is you lose weight like you would when you do cardio. Not as much at first, but that's because it's all body fat. You're not losing any muscle. In fact, you're probably gaining a little bit of muscle. But then you get the snowball effect. And so at the end of a 6-month process of losing, 15 pounds of body fat through strength training, you are now left with a metabolism that burns more calories than you started with. So in the example of the woman that I had said, who's, trying to lose, weight and only eating 1,500 calories. Well, if I do this right through strength training, she'll lose weight. And at the end of it, she can eat 2,000 calories and maintain that weight loss or that fat loss. So it's a much more sustainable process. And again, I want to be very clear, the other forms of exercise have lots of value. But the reason why on the book I say the no cardio solution, the reason why I make such a big deal about strength training is because in my experience, and I'll stand by this all day long, the most we could hope for in terms of people exercising consistently, and I'm referring to the average person. I'm not talking about health and fitness enthusiasts. I'm talking about my aunt,
Right.
neighbor, like average person. The most we could ever hope for is about 2 or 3 days a week of structured exercise. They're not going to work out every day. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
That's the most success I ever was getting people to do 2 or 3 days a week. And they're only going to do one form of exercise. We're really in dreamland if we think we can get the average person to have, a cardio component, a flexibility component, a strength. It's just not going to happen. They're going to do one form of exercise. They're going to do it maybe 2 days a week. Again, with the context that I talked about earlier with modern life, if you only picked one form of exercise and your goal is to get leaner and improve your health and decrease your odds of having all those chronic health issues, you do strength training, you do resistance training, hands down. Nothing comes close to it. So the book is really, about that. And there's so much more that goes into it. I mean, we could talk about the hormone aspect and the bone density and the effects on the brain and all that. And it's great because now the research is supporting, what I've observed for, like I said, over the last 2 decades training people.
I have a question. So we have a lot of patients and, they come to us and we try not to promote weight loss as like our niche, I guess you could say, because weight loss is very in depth. When you think about hormones, and some people lose weight very easily. Some people can do everything and not lose a pound. So when you have, and it is rare, I have to say, most of our patients that do change their diet and we get them to start moving and, like you're talking about doing, weight training versus just burning themselves out with cardio, they will actually lose a good amount of weight. But we do have patients that don't. I mean, no matter what we do, they don't lose weight. They can, work with someone on macros. They can, work on calories and all that stuff. They can work on hormones and they just can't get that scale to budge. So how would you approach someone like this?
Yeah. So a couple different things. First off, I think we have an obsession with the scale, and we have to be very clear what the value of a scale is. So when you step on a scale, it's just measuring your weight. So let's say I step on the scale. I think this morning I weighed myself and I was 205 pounds. And let's say I cut my leg off, I would lose an immediate, 30 pounds, right? Is that good? No, right. I would lost my leg, right? So all it's doing is it's measuring total body mass. I've talked about this on my show, and I love giving this example because it was so effective when I managed gyms. So back in the day when I was managing these big box health clubs, part of my job as a manager, among other things, was to attract new members into the facility, get them to sign up, get them to see results, hire a trainer, the whole thing. And oftentimes I would have a woman that would come in and I'd take her through and give her a tour, and she would look at the cardio and, okay, this is what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the classes. And then I'd take her through the machines and the weights and, I don't care about that. I'm not trying to get big and bulky. I just want to lose weight. And I would explain the benefits and all that stuff. But of course they would be resistant, which is totally understandable. Mainly because resistance training has been painted so inaccurately, which we can definitely get into. And then I would do this thing where I'd take them in my office at the end of the tour. And then I would say, if it was like something that I could see would make a difference, I would say, I tell you what, I'm going to call in one of my top female trainers. And if you can guess her body weight within 10 pounds, I'll give you a free membership for the next 3 months. What do you think? And they would always be like, oh yeah, I'll do that. No problem. And I knew they'd be honest because th'd want to get a free membership.
Right.
So then I'd get on the intercom and I would say, attention staff, so-and-so, please come to Sal's office. And then in would walk in my 5'2" trainer. And, I'm thinking of one person in particular because she was very sculpted, very lean. She had the kind of physique that most people who would walk into my gym would love to have. Just very, very tight, sculpted, nice arms and shoulders and glutes and, just look great posture, the whole deal, right? So in she would walk and I'd say, okay, how much do you think she weighs? And they'd say, oh, she's like 105 pounds. And I'd say, okay, now I'd have them step on the scale. And my trainer would step on the scale and she'd be, I don't remember what her weight was, but it was something like 130 pounds or 135 pounds. So it was like way off, way heavier than what this person would guess. And their mind, sometimes they wouldn't even believe it. They'd say, this scale's wrong. And I'd say, well, you could step on the scale, or we put a weight on the scale. Finally, they'd be like, well, that's crazy. That doesn't make any sense. Why does she weigh so much? Well, I would say, well, she has a lot of muscle and very little body fat. Muscle takes up very little space in comparison to body fat. If somebody loses 10 pounds of fat and gains 10 pounds of muscle, the scale will register the same weight, but they're going to be much smaller, much tighter. They'll have a lower body fat percentage. So I want to communicate this. And by the way, that one of the other things I would say is, I'd say after I would do that, I would say to my trainer, I'd say, can you tell this person what you ate for breakfast? And she would say, like, oh, I had 4 egg omelet with cheese, and I had a baked potato. And then, what did you have for lunch? Oh, I had a burrito from Chipotle. And I'd say, this tiny trainer is eating all of this food because her body is burning it off.
Her metabolism,
and it just makes it very sustainable. Now, I'd say that because I want people to understand that the scale has some value, but it's not the be all end all. So that's number one. Number two, we place and this is just a product of, I guess, marketing and society and maybe the things that we're really aware of. We stop paying attention to things that I think are far more important than the scale, which is like, how do I feel? How's my energy? How's my digestion? My libido? How am I sleeping? And so oftentimes in my experience, when you work with someone where it's very, very challenging to get them to lose weight and their body just seems to not budge, they also oftentimes ignore all these other positive things that have happened. So sure, your body might not be losing weight, but your sleep is so much better, and your energy is so much better, and your body feels so much more stable. You're not noticing that back pain that you used to have. And I think that's important to communicate because it gives us pause. It's a much more accurate judgment of how our bodies are progressing. And especially, and this is true for everybody if you do it right, but especially in these people where it's very stubborn, oftentimes those effects precede eventual fat loss. Now, it might take longer. It might take longer. Your body might be in a situation where it's very resistant because I believe your body has a memory of the stresses that you might have placed on it through overwork, lack of sleep, poor diet, inflammation, God knows what. So now here you are trying to lose weight and your body's like, I'm holding on to this security. But you know what? I can see that we're healthier, and that's why you feel more energy, and I can see you feel better and you're sleeping. Eventually, if you do that long enough, you will start to see the body composition start to change. But it's really important to focus on all those incredible benefits. I mean, I would rather be 18% body fat, but feel amazing than be 9% body fat and not feel so good. And so I want to communicate that because it's such an important thing for people to start to understand so that they can really see what's going on. Because if you just focus on the scale, I mean, I used to tell, at least half of my clients, part of the process was I would literally do this, take your scale and put it in the closet. We're not going to weigh you for the next.
I love that, Sal. That's awesome.
Yeah. And I know it's because of this issue right here. It's like the scale is the most important thing when it's actually one very general rough estimate of one thing that might be happening, but it tells us by itself, it tells us very, very little, and it should have actually very little value.
I recently started eating more because I tend not to eat that much. Like I just get full extremely quickly, and I'm busy. So I take a couple bites and then I go back and then I take a couple, you know what I mean? I do that throughout the day, and I've made myself actually eat more, and I've done more resistance training than cardio because I was doing more Peloton because it's easy. It's in my house and whatever. And we've been going to the gym and doing more stuff. And I know that I've gained weight. And my butt's getting a lot bigger, which I'm super excited about. And my kids love to tell me all the time about that. And I'm like, I don't care. I'm not insulted, but I don't weigh myself because I know I've gained weight, but I know it's a weight that's a good type of weight. So I don't care what the scale says, and I don't want it to mess with me mentally. So I just don't even look at it. It's just that it doesn't matter to me because it's how I feel. It's how I, the difference that in strength that I feel, and the different, me personally liking a curvy body better than a skinny, body that doesn't have much going on there. So I'm happier that way. My clothes fit a little different and all that. And that's something you have to adjust to. But I overall know it's actually a better thing for me. So I'm like, screw the scale. I'm not even looking at that.
Yeah. We've all of us. I mean, by the way, this applies to lots of things. Look at food, for example. Mm-hmm. We generally, people value food for one thing. How palatable is it? Like, that's all the value of food. I mean, here's your evidence. When the average person is talking to their friends about what they're going to eat for lunch, or when they're choosing what to eat for breakfast or what to have for dinner, mostly what they're considering is, am I going to enjoy eating this? Is it going to taste good? That's almost all the value. And the problem with that is we've not only have we ignored all the other value. By the way, palatability is a value. It's just one, though. Right. We've ignored all the other values of food. And because of that, we're unaware of how some foods affect us. It was always mind-blowing to me. I understand more now, but I remember as an early trainer, I'd have a client and they, I would ask them, about their health, and they always answer the same. Oh, I'm good. So I'd have to go down the list and be like, do you get heartburn? Oh yeah, but it's okay, because I take Rolaids every day, or or whatever. Right. And they don't even realize that maybe what they're eating could be causing this issue. And they're just unaware. All they're aware of is just how good the food tastes, or bloat, Oh yeah, I get bloated. It's just, just whatever.
It's no big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. It happens all the time. Like, just know that maybe your food could be causing that. The side effects of that are profound, because if you start to become aware of all the values of food, you actually start to associate foods with other things, which then, here's the exciting part, oftentimes you'll crave and enjoy those foods.
Right.
So like, for example, if I travel, before COVID, Mind Pump would travel quite a bit. And so we'd be on the road and we do these live events, and man, would I crave a big bowl of vegetables when I got home. Now, if it was just about the palatability, no way I would crave a bowl of vegetables. A bowl of broccoli, I don't care how you prepare it, it's not going to be as good as a burger and fries, or
right.
It's just not, right? But why was I craving a bowl of vegetables? Because through becoming aware of the values of food, I identified, both consciously, but then it becomes an unconscious awareness, that eating a bowl of broccoli really does wonders for my digestion and how I feel. And I had to become aware of that first. But then eventually, it's like, when I got home, I'm like, my wife would be like, what do you want for dinner? Oh, please make a ton of vegetables. I've been on the road. We haven't been eating much. My digestion doesn't feel, and I want to eat that. Now, it's, by the way, if you're watching this or listening to this and you think that doesn't make it, that wouldn't work. Yes, it does. Marketers already do this to you. Mm-hmm. Look at food commercials. It's not just about the food. It's about associations. Like, when you go drink a beer, you're thinking about, it depends on the beer, right? Oh, you're on the beach, or, oh, I'm partying with hot chicks, or whatever. They've already made those associations. Like, they would never, there's a food company would never take, like, imagine like Pizza Hut, putting the pizza out there, and then they show a guy on the toilet with diarrhea. They would never make that association, because people wouldn't eat it. So this is real. Like, you can do this with yourself. You just have to be aware of these things. And the scale, the worship of the scale, really distorts your perception of what's going on. The mirror can do the same thing if it's just about how I look. And boy, are we really bad at identifying, our really how good or healthy we look. I mean, here's your evidence right here. Okay. If you're over the age of 35, go look at pictures of yourself when you were in your early 20s. And you know what ends up happening? You'll look at the picture and be like, I remember when I thought I looked terrible when I was 21. And I'm looking at myself and I look at me like, we have to understand that we're in this unaware state. Yep. But if you bring this awareness and do it the right way, good health becomes much easier. And then what follows good health always is this looking good. I mean, healthy is what looks good. That's what's
It's
sexy
true.
and attractive. And I do touch on this in the book as well. I do talk about nutrition. I don't go into detail of nutrition because I don't think that's as important. I go into the behaviors of nutrition because I think that's ultimately what drives, the choices that we make.
So I wanted to ask you this, and I was talking to Crystal beforehand because this is a very touchy subject.
Yeah.
And we, want to be careful not to be saying this the wrong way. And I was actually on a different podcast the other day for myself, and I mentioned this on that too. So there, and I can't remember the details of it. There was a magazine cover of someone who is obese. It was, basically saying like, this is health, or I don't remember exactly.
Right.
I think you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really bothered me because it's like, I understand that people are trying to make sure that you love yourself no matter how you look. And that is important because we know working with people, everyone is going to, health looks different in all sizes.
For everybody.
Very true. Very, very true. And we support that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that we should be promoting obesity as a form of health either. And I think that that's what's starting to happen. And it's concerning to me as a doctor that no, actually, this is not health. This is really hurting you, as a matter of fact. And, I get the message on one side of what they're saying, but the message is being skewed, in my opinion, as to like almost striving for that.
Yes.
And, I was like, God, Sal would be such a good person to talk to us about,
Yeah, we did a whole episode on this. So before I get into it, I want to be very clear. Like I made my career working with people in that category of obesity. I worked with everyday average people. Obesity is quite common, especially among people that hire personal trainers. Mm-hmm. At one point, I worked with doctors who did gastric bypass. So I worked with clients who were really challenged by this issue. And I feel quite a bit for people in this situation because first off, all of us are dealing with our own challenges. Yeah, the difference is oftentimes our challenges are not so visible, right? So I may have an issue with alcohol, or maybe I have terrible relationships, or I abuse myself in other ways, but you might not be able to tell just by looking at me. But if you're 100 pounds overweight, oftentimes you're judged or shamed, or people make assumptions about you. So I want to be very clear that this is something I'm very passionate about, and I want to help.
Same here. Like we want to make that clear too, because the worst thing for me is people not understanding that it's not as easy for everyone to lose weight and all that. And we want to make that very clear that we understand that. And that's what we work with.
Yes.
But I'm not talking about that.
No, let's get into that. So I just want to say that first, but what we're looking at, and this is what we're labeling. We did a whole episode on this as woke fitness or woke health. So we have the fitness industry, and what is now starting to permeate the fitness industry or the health industry is this philosophy, this woke philosophy in which they've taken self-love and self-care and they've distorted it to the point where they're really manipulating people in very negative ways. Okay, so to be more clear with this, or to illustrate this better, let's remove ourselves. So let's just say I'm somebody dealing with this, okay? And let's separate me from the situation just to make it easier to understand. So let's just say you have a child, okay? You have a kid, and you love that kid. We were just talking about this at the beginning of the podcast, just how much you love your child. I have 3 kids. Now, if my kid comes to me and says, hey, Dad, I want to eat cookies all day long every day because they taste good, and of course they're exciting to eat and they're fun, I'm going to say no. Now, why do I say no? Is it because I don't love my kid? No, it's the opposite.
Exactly.
It's because I love my child. Now, sometimes they'll have a cookie, but most of the time I love them. Therefore, I'm going to try to ensure that they eat and sleep and live in a way and develop behaviors that are better and healthy for them in all senses. By the way, health is a sphere. It's not just physical.
It is.
We're talking about mental health and spiritual health and, your relationship with people. This is all part of the health sphere. Okay, so if you are obese, if you're in that category of obese, well, first off, objectively speaking, this is objective. If you are obese, your health is not as good as it could be as if you were not obese. Now, this doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have terrible health, but if you took yourself 70 pounds overweight versus yourself at and by the way, there's a range of healthy body fat. So I'm going to say relatively lean. I don't mean shredded. I just mean relatively lean. Okay. If you were to compare yourself with all factors being equal, the relatively lean version of yourself would have better health, better mobility, better quality of life. That's objectively a fact. But if you're in that category of, obese, that is a reflection of you not caring for yourself or loving yourself in some ways in your life. Okay. So it's not self-love to eat in a way or live in a way that makes you 70 pounds overweight. And again, I want to be very clear. All of us have issues that we do with ourselves that are not exactly, in terms of their actions, reflecting proper self-love and self-care. But to say that that's self-love is false. It's the opposite of self-love. And also, again, one more thing, body image is not the same as self-image. So the acceptance movement is not saying, oh, I'm obese and this is great. This means I love myself. No. Self-acceptance and self-love is separating body image from self-image. So I can objectively say I'm very overweight. This is because of some of my behaviors that are not reflective of me loving myself. However, I'm still a human that deserves dignity, and I'm a good person.
Absolutely. I love that.
That's acceptance. Real acceptance is honest. Real love is honest. We've heard the term tough love. Love is not everything is easy and doing what feels good all the time. I think we often confuse love with feeling. No. You know how often I have to do things that don't feel good because I love my kids? You think it's easy as a parent to tell your kid no? Or no, sorry, got to take that away. Or
yes,
it easy to do the opposite as a matter.
Absolutely,
absolutely. And so that's not love. Love can be very tough. It's like you have a friend who's an alcoholic, and you love them, and so at some point, it's going to hurt their feelings. It's going to be tough. It might even threaten your relationship with them, but you love them too much, and you sit them down and say, "Look, you're killing yourself. Stop doing this." Loving them wouldn't be just I want to feel good. Or that's actually not loving them, right? So what they've done in this, and this is the marketing, again, kind of woke side of the fitness space, is we're going to make people just feel good, and we're going to take the responsibility away from people, which is terrible, and make them feel empowered by saying things like, it's not your fault, it's healthy. Oh, and by the way you're treating yourself, you're actually loving yourself. So it's all good. Why don't you go ahead and keep doing that? I mean, if that were the case, then doing drugs all day long would be the same thing. Like, why would it be bad for me to be high on cocaine all the time? Feels good. Feels great. So it's a very dangerous train of thought and philosophy that is starting to inch its way in to fitness. Now, I do think that the fitness space it's going to be a tough one for them to take over, because people who are into fitness and do it the right way understand a big portion of that is real self-love and discipline. So, and taking responsibility. I mean, if you meet anybody who exercises on a regular basis for years and is really, really mindful about their health in a true and healthy way, what you'll hear from them is a lot of personal responsibility, a lot of acceptance, a lot of self-love. So it's gonna be hard for them to break through that. But unfortunately, they're reaching a lot of people who could otherwise be helped, and instead they're telling them, you're not responsible for this. It's society's fault or whatever. It's healthy. You're loving yourself. It's great. Just keep going. What a terrible lie. And you're hurting people. Now, I do understand, by the way, why this is somewhat why this is attractive. Part of the blame also lays square at the feet of the fitness and health industry, because the mainstream, and I'm not talking about the people who really make a positive impact, coaches, trainers,
Yeah.
those people really do it the right way. I'm talking about the mainstream health and fitness industry, the popular fitness industry, the entertainment side of the fitness industry. The Jillian Michaels is the personal trainer on The Biggest Loser, and the fake doctors on TV that, promote whatever. Like part of the problem is that they've been selling things the wrong way. They've been preying on people's insecurities.
Yeah.
And so when you try to do what they tell you, you feel worse about yourself.
Right.
It doesn't work. And at some point, somebody comes to you and says, hey, I know you've tried this 100 times. It's never worked. It's not your fault. Don't worry. It's not your responsibility. You are loving yourself. Boy, is that attractive. It's like, yeah, you know what? That feels better, because this whole time I've been hating myself. This whole time I've been taking these diet pills and doing all these crazy diets and, doing these, urban hip hop Zumba classes online, and they're not helping me. Like, okay, that sounds great. So I get where it comes from, but it's wrong. It's actually evil. And if we allow that to become the narrative, we are screwed. We're totally screwed. We're going to be in a worse position than we are even now today.
And what I'm most concerned about is that it's becoming unpopular. You're getting talked bad about for wanting to be thinner or in shape and take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Physically, it's like you're not almost allowed to talk about that anymore, and it's just weird to me. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. And so I think that people just need to understand exactly. And this is why I wanted to ask you, because I knew that you would do a very good job of explaining it, and you have. And I really hope that
appreciate it. Yeah.
And take this the right way and understand what we're saying. It's really mostly about health. And, if you're not treating your body well, that is not self-love.
No.
And it's not love for the people who love you, because your kids are going to suffer. Your family members are going to suffer because you're going to be sick. Most likely, not everybody will be, but a lot of people will be. And it's just not something I think it should be encouraged. I think, like I said, I think health comes in all different sizes.
100%.
And that's genetics and different things that play a role in that. So I don't think everyone should aim to be a size 4. I think that you aim for health. Your body is going to follow what that looks like.
Absolutely. You reminded me of a scenario that happened to me years ago that was really profound for me. I went to at the time, my ex-wife worked for a tech company, and it was I think it was a holiday dinner that we went to. So we went with the whole company, and we're sitting at this big table with lots of people, and people didn't know me, and so introducing ourselves, what do you do? And I said, oh, I'm a personal trainer. At the time, I owned a fitness and wellness studio. We had personal training, massage therapy, nutrition, like the whole deal, right? And oftentimes I'm very aware, at least I was, that when I would say I'm a trainer, people sometimes feel immediately like, oh, he's watching what I'm doing, or I have to say something about this. But it's okay. I mean, I had it at this point, I've been doing it for a while, and I got it, especially, if I'm talking to non-fitness people or whatever. So it's, oh, I'm a personal trainer. This is what I do. And sure enough, there's comments like, oh, I better not eat the bread, or I better do it. And I get it. And so it's not a big deal. It rolls off, and we're having a good time. And so, the drinks start flowing. And so people start to become a little bit more, I guess, forward. And there was this woman there, and she goes, Sal, I had a friend who was a fitness fanatic, and she worked out every day, and she ate perfectly, and she did all this stuff. And then when she was 56 years old, she got breast cancer, and then she died. And she goes, I saw that, and I said, why would I do any of that? I'm just going to enjoy my life, and it's a waste of time. And so I paused. I heard what she said, and I paused, and I said, look, here's the deal. I said, of course, there's no guarantees. I mean, I could literally, after dinner, I could walk outside and get in a car accident and die.
Right.
I said, exercising and eating right is not about necessarily living longer. It's about living better. I said, her quality of life was probably pretty good until she got cancer. And I said, I think you're looking at exercise as a punishment, and you're looking at eating right as a punishment. Now, it makes sense that you would say to yourself, I just want to enjoy life. Why would I want to go beat myself up and punish myself in the gym? I said, in reality, it's not like that. It's actually just taking care of yourself. And we all want to do that. And so I said, it's really about improving, your quality of life. And I think that's an important thing that we need to communicate as people in this space, because it's been communicated so wrong for so long. One more point I want to make that's very important. And we talked about this on our show, I don't know, at least 100 times. When we're saying health can look like a lot of different things, so can bad health.
Right.
I'm going to be just blunt. The worst food relationships and relationships with fitness that I've seen in my life are from people who work in the fitness industry.
Yes.
We work with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The body image issues, the orthorexia,
yes,
or food issues that you see with people in the fitness industry is alarming. Part of it is, I think, people with those problems, they move into an industry so that they can surround themselves with these obsessions and issues. These people may eat perfectly, but it's a stress on them. And if they veer off their diet, oh my God. And they don't foster relationships because of it. They don't go hang out with their friends because of it.
Yes.
They exercise obsessively because of it. They damage their bodies through the use of substances or surgeries, or even just hating themselves so much that they become obsessed. So poor health looks a lot of different ways as well. So, and those people are not loving themselves either.
No, exactly.
I love that you touched base on that, because it's the opposite end of the spectrum too, right? We see some patients, they look like the epitome of health. They're in the best of shape, but their insides are inflamed. Their hormones are tanked. It's just, so it's in both sides of the spectrum.
And look, there was a study that was done. I think Stanford did this study where they showed that having poor relationships was as bad for your health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day, I believe.
Wow.
Is what the comparison was, right? So you could be like, and I know people like this. They eat perfectly. They work out every single day. They have no friends, or the only friends they have are just as obsessed as they are. They have bad relationships because they don't want to go to the birthday party. They don't want to go to the thing. It just, whatever. And so their health isn't great either. They think they're healthy, but oftentimes their health isn't great either. And then, of course, there's studies on people who overexercise and what that does to your body as well. I mean, there's runners, chronic runners. There was a study done on running that showed that if you ran a little bit, you had an improvement in health. But then if you were like the fanatic, you actually had as high of a chance of dying of heart-related issues as somebody who was obese.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this isn't just for people in the category of obesity. This is this covers quite a bit. But again, I want to be very, very clear. What they're promoting as this is loving yourself when they have a picture of somebody who's, 100 pounds overweight. No, that's just as bad as the bodybuilding magazine that posts the guy who's on tons of steroids and growth hormone.
Exactly.
Is saying that this is health. It's just as bad. It's not true. It's not true.
Right.
Well, thank you for hitting that really the nail on the head with that, because I was like, I need to talk to Sal about this because this has been on my mind. It's something that I'm seeing more and more. And
it's a sensitive subject. It really is.
Sensitive subject. We don't want to offend anybody, but it's true. And I'm really glad that we also mentioned both sides of the spectrum, because it goes both ways. People who are in, 6% body fat, or people who are, 100 pounds overweight. Neither is self-love most of the time.
Yeah. And I think it's important that us in the space communicate it with compassion and empathy, but we also hold firm to the truth, and we don't allow ourselves to be intimidated, because we're the last stand. That's it. If it's not for us or trainers or coaches, people in this situation are screwed. Nothing's going to help them. They're not going to go on Google and find the solutions, and their doctor definitely isn't going to help them. So we need to stand steady and strong, but make sure we communicate it in a way. Because I know it can, and this happens to me too. I can get so mad that I can communicate it in a way that doesn't sound compassionate or empathetic, which is the opposite of how I feel. I built my career, around this. To touch on the hormone stuff, because I know this is a big thing that you both work on. And I think it's such an important thing to look at, because our hormones both reflect our lifestyle, but also drive our quality of life. I mean, boy, do hormones make a tremendously huge difference. And there's a lot of things that can contribute to your hormone profile and you know, how they are. And if you're a woman, how your estrogen and progesterone ratios are. And if you're a man, how your testosterone levels are, and, you know, your insulin sensitivity and growth hormone and cortisol. And, you know, they're very important to look at. And there's a lot of things that influence them. But let's look at exercise just for a second, because we touched on this earlier, and I want to make this point because it's very, very important. And I think it's something that most people had no idea about. When you look at exercise and how it affects hormones, we have to look at the adaptations, again, that exercise induces, and then what hormone profiles are favorable for those adaptations. So if we go back and talk about making cardio the cornerstone of your exercise solution in combination with diet for, let's say, obesity. And remember, we talked about how studies are clear. You'll lose muscle as a result of this. Think about the hormones associated with muscle loss. Let's talk about men for a second. Losing muscle is much harder when your testosterone levels are high. Okay. It's much harder. I mean, in fact, if I just inject a man with testosterone and he does nothing, we'll see a little bit of muscle gain, right? Testosterone drives muscle gain. And if there's too much of it, it's hard for your body to get rid of muscle. So if I'm doing a form of exercise as a man that is telling my body to slow its metabolism by reducing muscle mass, one of the things that it actually does is it actually lowers my testosterone. And in fact, right. In fact, we see this in studies.
Yes.
Yep.
We see that lots of cardio in men pretty reliably will lower testosterone. Now, resistance training or strength training, which the main adaptation is to build strength and muscle, actually does the opposite. It reliably, when done appropriately, raises testosterone in all men. What does that mean? You're low testosterone, it'll raise your testosterone. You're at high testosterone, it raises your testosterone. Of course, within range, so it doesn't produce, you know, like anabolic steroid testosterone.
Right.
but your testosterone levels go up, and they get closer to these what we would call, for lack of a better term, youthful levels of testosterone, closer to what you might have had when you were in your late teens and 20s. It also upregulates androgen receptors reliably. These are the receptors, or the locks that the testosterone key attaches to produce what it does. By the way, if you had no androgen receptors, you could have all the testosterone in the world. It wouldn't do anything for you.
Yeah.
So when I'm doing resistance training or strength training as a man, I'm raising testosterone and increasing androgen receptor density. There's more of them. And that's, again, because my body's like, okay, we need to get stronger. In order to get stronger, we're going to need this hormone, and we're going to need it to be more effective. So that's just for men. Let's talk about insulin for a second. One of the most effective ways to improve insulin sensitivity is just build muscle. In fact, studies will show, even in the severely obese, they don't lose a pound. All they do is gain muscle. They improve their insulin sensitivity. Muscle is very insulin sensitive. It also is one way that we store glycogen or store sugar. So now we've got this bigger bank to store carbohydrates and sugars. So it's a very effective way to improve insulin sensitivity. Now, of course, there's more to it, but it's the exercise side of that formula. Now, why is this important? Oh boy, I mean, improved insulin sensitivity reduces your risk of all kinds of diseases, including diabetes and Alzheimer's and dementia, which are often referred to by wellness experts as type 3 diabetes, right?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, there was a study out of Sydney, Australia, where they did resistance training with people who had Alzheimer's. And it's the first time in history that we've ever seen a form of exercise stop the progression of Alzheimer's. We've never seen that before with any non-medical intervention. I don't even think we've seen it with a medical intervention. So pretty incredible, right? Let's talk about women for a second. What hormone profile would build muscle, right? Think about that. And what kind of hormone profile would take muscle off your body? If I gave you a patient and you could somehow magically just manipulate the hormones. And I said to you, produce a hormone profile that's going to make her lose muscle. What would you do, right? You would raise cortisol.
Yep.
You would decrease
Raise
insulin,
estrogen. Yeah.
right? Decrease insulin sensitivity. You throw their progesterone estrogen ratios off.
Estrogen. Yep.
Right. That's exactly what you would do. Now, what if I said to you, change their hormone profile so they build muscle? You would reduce cortisol, improve insulin sensitivity, and change the ratio of estrogen to progesterone in a favorable way to build more muscle. By the way, that's a more, again, for lack of a better term, youthful profile. We're not even talking about growth hormone. That's another one, right? So the side effect of the adaptations that come from resistance training or strength training are to produce a hormone profile that is more youthful. That's why, and I'm sure you guys have noticed this with your patients, but I definitely noticed it with my clients. I used to love, this was my favorite comment, by the way, and I would get it more often with my older clients because I think they were more honest and blunt. This would always happen after about 2 or 3 months of training. They would come in. I remember one lady in particular, it was a hilarious conversation. She was 71, I believe, and we're working out maybe 3 months into it, and I'm only training her maybe once or twice a week with strength training. And she comes in and she goes, can you run down the effects of strength training with me again? So I said, oh, you build muscle, metabolism boost, this and that. She goes, okay. She goes, any other effects? And so I smile because I know what she's talking about. And I said, okay, what are you feeling?
I love that.
And she goes, I feel more Randy. She's
That's so cute, Randy.
using a term that's, and I start laughing. I said, yeah, well, yes, that's a very common effect because you're producing more of these youthful levels of hormones. One of the side effects of it is a healthy libido. This is what you notice when you do proper strength training.
Yep.
You notice your libido goes up. You don't always notice that with other forms of exercise. In fact, lots of cardio often produces the opposite. You notice your libido start to decrease. So the effects are incredible. But again, people don't know this. I mean, people still think, especially women, that if they do resistance training, they're going to look like a guy or they're going to build crazy muscle, or that's
so hard. People, that is the biggest misconception. You know how hard it is to actually build a deep amount of muscle as a woman? Give me a break.
I know it's pretty fun. I've never in my life trained a client who worked out with me and then called me the next day. Oh, Sal, damn you. I'm too
much.
I'm too muscular now. No.
Doesn't happen. It's in, we can touch on that. I mean, there's such a wide genetic range of muscle building ability. And on the extreme end, you have like 0.01% of the population that builds muscle very, very quickly. And on the other end, you have people who have genetic issues that can't build lots of strength and muscle. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. I mean, it's so rare. Think about it this way. How many times in life have you seen, in everyday life, someone who's 7 feet tall, right? Forget going to a basketball game, an NBA game. Just go to the grocery store, go to the whatever airport. How many times in your life have you seen with someone over 7 feet tall? I bet you can remember.
Yeah, maybe one.
Right. That's because 7 feet tall is rare, right? Okay. Somebody that can build muscle like a bodybuilder is probably more rare than someone who's 7 feet tall. So if you're somebody that builds just insane amounts of muscle, you're probably already muscular and you don't even have to work out.
Yeah.
So not something you need to worry about at all. The most you could hope for with very consistent traditional resistance training is a tight, sculpted, strong body with a fast metabolism. You're not going to get huge, big muscles. That's such a huge, terrible, stupid myth that is just
I know it really is.
It prevents so many people from doing such an effective form of exercise.
I've weight trained for 20, 30 years, however long, and I've never been gigantic,
Yes.
I mean, I've been really toned and had a good body, but I've never been like, wow, I'm too muscular right now. I'm good. That's never happened.
No, it doesn't happen. And again, that's part of that is because we associate with resistance training are the most extreme examples of what you can accomplish, which is not reality. It just isn't reality. Again, what people want their body to look like the average person, they're going to get that more often and more reliably through proper resistance training than any other form of exercise. People just don't know. And really, the reason why I named the book the Resistance Training Revolution is because I'm trying to shift that mindset. It's like my goal is, when friends get together, a group of women get together on Sunday and they're hanging out and they
Yes, I
we
saw
should
you
all-
talking about this.
yeah, like we should all start working out. And somebody says, "Oh, let's go lift weights." Like that's what
That's your goal. Yeah.
That's totally my goal. And I really want to change that conversation, because the old conversation is just, it's so wrong. It's done so much damage. And if people only knew, it would really change their minds.
So what makes your book different? Like what can people find within it? Just fill us in a little bit with that too for our listeners.
No problem. So a couple different things. I definitely base my opinions on two things.
Mm-hmm.
One is research. So it's got to be based on research. For example, I talked about the metabolism slowing down. There's several studies that illustrate this exceptionally well. There was one study done, for example, with the Hadza tribe. This is a modern hunter-gatherer group in northern Tanzania. They live the way we did thousands of years ago. They're very, very, very active. They don't have technology or electronics. And scientists went and studied them to see how many calories they were burning on a daily basis. And they were shocked to find that they burned right around the same amount of calories as the average Western couch potato. And the reason why this is because their bodies adapted, because food is hard to come by. That's what we evolved to do. So if we do lots of cardio, our bodies slow down our metabolism. It would make no sense to burn 8,000 calories a day as a hunter-gatherer. We wouldn't have survived. So it's based on research. Also base it on my experience training, hundreds of people directly, thousands of people by proxy over the last couple decades. And what I got from experience is less about the methods, although that's important, but more about how to communicate it and more about how to get those methods to be effective through behaviors, right? So I'll give you a simple example, like diet. Mm-hmm. Now, it's quite clear in research that if you take a person who wants to lose weight and you very, strictly control their calories and their macros, you can produce weight loss. So if I had a person who's obese and I said, okay, it looks like you're eating 1,700 calories a day. I want you now to only eat 1,300 calories a day, and here's your macros. And then they did it and they followed it to a T, they would definitely lose weight. Now, the problem is that would not last. It's not based on behaviors. At some point, it's not going to work for them. They're going to go off of it. And we know this because this is what happens, right? The trainer side of me that's experienced, I don't communicate that. Mm-hmm. If I want someone to eat less, you know what I do? I'll say something like this. Here's what I want you to do, Mrs. Johnson. I want you to eat as much as you want. Just eat whole natural foods. Just avoid heavily processed foods, but eat as much as you want. And I know that if they do that, they're going to reduce their calories by about 500 calories a day. And again, the research supports this. Research shows that eating hyperpalatable processed foods results in an increase of caloric intake by about 500. Now, why do I communicate it this way versus the other way? Because I'm telling Mrs. Johnson to eat as much as she wants.
Yeah.
She doesn't feel deprived. It's behavior-based. And the other one, she feels like she's restricting. This one, she feels like, and I used to do this to clients, and they'd come to me and be like, oh my God, I'm losing weight. This is so weird. I'm full. And I'm like, well, here's what heavily processed foods do to your appetite. This is what they do with your satiety. They make you eat more. They're engineered to do so. That's one example. Here's another one. I know that intensity is important with exercise, although it's often abused. I know that workouts need to be done a certain way with a certain level of intensity. Of course, it needs to be appropriate to get the body to change and blah, blah, blah. But here's how I communicate exercise. Here's what I tell people. I tell people, stop going to the gym to work out. Just go to the gym and practice.
I love that.
Instead of going to the gym to work your legs, right? Because here's what happens. They go and I got to get my legs sore. I got to get shaky. I need to make the soup, crazy burn. Instead, I say, don't worry about that. Here's what I want you to do. Do these 2 leg exercises, and I'll give them squats and lunges, for example. I'll say, okay, I just want you to practice them. Get really good at doing those well. So now the person goes to the gym and guess what they're focused on? Form, technique, control, and what ends up being self-regulated is intensity. Because you know what happens naturally? The person practices the squats and they know, Sal said, all right, I'm not working out, I'm just practicing. And over time, what do they do naturally? They go heavier, they go a little harder. But what they're really doing is training the skill of the exercise, which is the most important part, right? That's what produces the best results. So in my book, what you're going to see is, number one, I communicate very easily to the average person. Most people will read the book in a full day and understand the whole thing.
I did. It's awesome. I'm doing your dumbbell workout.
Thank you. And I communicate in effective ways. Rather than telling you, do it this way, I'll say, here, do it this way. This is a behavior. If you focus on this, you're going to get all the other results, all the results that you're looking for.
Yeah, we love that. We love your book. Yeah, it's so, I mean, everyone has to get it. Where is it available, Sal?
So you can go on our website, theresistancetrainingrevolution.com, or you can buy it anywhere books are sold. So Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, anywhere you can find books, you'll be able to find it.
And where can people find you?
Of course, the Mind Pump podcast. And then if you want to find me personally, you can go to my Instagram, which is Mind Pump Sal.
Yes. And Sal is very funny on Instagram, especially his stories.
They're the best. Becky's like, we need to get more ideas. Just go to Mind Pump. I'm like, all right, man, we're going to get more. That's so true.
I'm glad you brought that up. There's a little warning there. My stories, I post memes and my sense of humor can sometimes be a little dark. So
it's funny.
It's hilarious.
Laugh and reevaluate that.
You just got to not take life so seriously. Have a little fun.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well,
thank you so much.
Sal. You've been awesome. We're going to come visit you. I told Adam that I'm like, by the way, just letting you know I'm coming back out there.
All right. We'd love to see you guys for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. And don't forget to leave a review. And when you leave a review, make sure you mention Sal's episode, because we want people to listen to this specific episode and get his book, because his book is really, it's a great, easy read, and it makes so much sense. And it's very different from a lot of the other books out there. So thank you so much, Sal. Thanks for being, I love how Sal really speaks, because you've researched what you're talking about. And that's not always true. So that's a huge deal. So what Sal says is actually really the truth. And I love that. So thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Sal, for being on, and have a good day, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thanks. You keep doing what you guys are doing. I love it. Thank you.
Yes.
Well.